talk more about the COP26 underway, we can bring in our chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons. Rob, we were just watching that report there from our correspondents on the ground in India, and you were saying that it's complicated for a country like India who wants to develop, who is in developing, but it's expensive to do away with coal.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a massive dilemma for India at the moment. It's an economy which is developing quite fast. It's a massive economy as well, but it's developing on the basis of carbon energy, essentially. It relies very, very heavily on coal, and dirty coal at that. So the problem is, how do you wean the economy off that? Obviously, the idea is it should switch over to renewables.
Yeah.
But India doesn't have the resources at this time to make that switch by itself. So it is caught between a rock and a hard place, essentially. It needs to develop because it's got to feed its own people. It's got to provide the propulsion that allows the economy to carry on developing at the rate it is at the moment. But it knows that if it carries on using the means that it's using at the moment, that it is guaranteeing that in the years ahead, and not so distant years ahead, that the climate change inside India is going to become so bad that it will offset by a long way any gains it makes in economic development by using coal in the first place. So there's the dilemma it faces. And what the Indian government is saying, and not just the Indian government, in the developing world, it's a common refrain at the moment, is we need help. At Paris, we were promised $100 billion
per year.
Dollars per annum by 2020. Apparently, according to the OECD, they reached 80 billion last year. Still 20 billion short. That's a long way short. And there is talk now that they may reach 20 billion, 100 billion for the developing world by 2023. Yeah. They need the money now. If they're to make the switch to renewables, to wind and to nuclear and to other clean
solar,
fuels, then they have to have the support now, and that is part of what the argument was at the G20 summit in Rome, with the Indian leadership making just that point. We understand, we're facing the same consequences of climate change, even worse than you are facing in the developed world. But we can't make the switch unless you help us.
And what I mentioned, in my intro to that report, that a lot of developing states will be watching closely what India commits to from the COP26 summit. And another developing state that everyone will be watching is China, but Xi Jinping is not there at the COP26.
Yeah, not there. And, the Chinese have just made clear what their nationally determined contribution is going to be for their country's plan, in other words, for reducing emissions by 2030. And it's not impressive, it has to be said. It's very little changed since 2015. And the whole idea was that every 5 years after the Paris Agreement in 2015, the governments would ratchet up their programs in response to the situation. We know the situation globally has not got better since 2015, and the hope was that China would come up with an NDC which would reflect that reality. And bear in mind, China too is suffering enormously from climate change.
We had floods there recently
massive
as well.
Floodings. 250,000 people displaced this year as a consequence of floods in China. So, it's a real problem for China as well. But the problem for China, too, is it depends so heavily, like India, on coal to drive its economy.
Speaking, U.S. President Joe Biden has just arrived at the COP26 summit, and he's clearly trying to show that America is back and in the driving seat here. Yeah. But his predecessor left the Paris Climate Agreement. So what guarantees are there that America is going to stay the course?
Well, none. That's the bottom line. And obviously that's what people are concerned about. But, the G20, everybody likes Joe Biden. He's on message on climate change. But, First of all, can he deliver? Let's forget about what happens in 4 years' time, 3
When
years'
is the
time,
next
when
election?
the next election takes place, maybe Joe Biden wins if he stands again, or the Democrats win, and there's a president who remains sympathetic to the goals of the Paris Conference of 2015, or maybe there's somebody different. But now, today, what is happening in the United States? Joe Biden has proposed a remarkable raft of legislation which could transform the United States approach to climate change. $555 billion worth of proposals about perhaps to go through Congress and get passed. But there is still a possibility it won't get through because of opposition, not from the Republicans, but from two members of his own party, the Democrats. So that's the dilemma he faces. It's not what happens in a few years from now. It's can he bring his own party with him?
We'll see what happens, and we will be bringing you the live statements from the COP26 in Glasgow as soon as that gets underway.